Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Welcome back. So we're reviewing the Sunday Papers. We are live on air. We are also streaming on Facebook, so you can tune in and see us if you so wish. Your headlines, and we'll start off with the Sunday Times, and it's Liverpool. As you can see, it's Mo Salah. It only takes a Mo. Super Salah strikes as Liverpool go top of Premier League. They beat Brighton 1-0 yesterday. And then, very interesting piece on the bottom, super rich alert to Chelsea sale. So it seems the word is out there that Roman Abramovich has had enough. He is selling Chelsea. He's looking for over £2 billion. And they reckon he'll get it as well. That's the Sunday Times. Sunday Independent then also has Mo Salah on the front here. Salah strike puts Poole on top. And then John Green at the bottom. Tyrone take on Dublin with hope in their heart. Mickey Hart here pointing out that they weren't exactly favourites for their other All-Ireland wins against Kerry back in the day. Next up we have the Mail. The Cop King, it's Mo Salah. Salah sends Reds to top, but Seagulls cause some nervy moments at Anfield. Liverpool not at their absolute best yesterday, and Brighton quite good as well. And then here on the right-hand side, Gunners boss denies Ozil bust-up. So Unai Emery has denied there's been an issue with Mesut Ozil. It seems the reason he wasn't playing yesterday is that on Friday he said he had a cold and he was not well enough to play. He turned up at the stadium and watched. Obviously he was subbed off last week against Chelsea, and there's a few bits inside as well about Emery asking for more work rate from Ozil, but he had a cold, that's why he wasn't there on yesterday. So the Sunday World back page, it's a full wraparound Pope special, so we don't get a back page on the Sunday World. It's all about the Pope today, pictures of his visit yesterday. Sunday Mirror Sport, top of the cops, Mo helps Juggernaut find another gear. And Precious Ones, this is about Jose Mourinho. It seems Reds great Lou Macari reckons the modern game gives managers no control. They're all too precious, says Lou. Front page of The Observer, it's about Arsenal off the mark. First win for Emery, but Arsenal manager denies rift with Ozil is their story again. Then the Star, red tops, Klopp's looking down on the rest after Mo bags again at Anfield. Manchester City obviously dropped points. And on that point, handball, new call for video refs as champs are held. Obviously it was a handball yesterday against Manchester City. So they are our back pages. We have Cliona Foley here in studio, off the bench podcast presenter, journalist, and Declan Lynch from the Sunday Independent. You're both very welcome. Thanks for coming in. You made it into town.
Do we get religious special dispensation for coming in?
You do, yes. You're all going to heaven after coming in.
I'm wearing paper colours and everything, I've been told.
Was that intentional?
That was accidental completely, trust me.
Right, okay. No, we thank you for skipping the Pope and coming in here. It's much appreciated.
Very welcome.
So we might start with I guess something which, when you think about it, and all the while doing the Sunday paper review, doesn't happen that often. Martin O'Neill doing sit-down interviews with Irish journalists, and he's done a raft of them lately. In fact, we'll have him on the show on Tuesday night. I recorded one with him on Friday. Philip Quinn's one appears with him today in the Mail on Sunday. He's certainly on the charm offensive, Martin O'Neill. He's done Liam Mackey in the last while. He did Dan McDonnell. When I was there on Friday at Abbottstown, I bumped into Emmett Malone coming out. Tony O'Donoghue was waiting there. Q102 were there. So he is very much sitting down with the great and the good of the Irish media landscape and putting forward, I suppose, his defence, his thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they have decided that they better do something about, the way Martin is coming across to the world, because the by now legendary Tony O'Donoghue interview was just one of many kind of strangely sort of charmless or, bitter and unpleasant type of interviews. And the one thing we know...
It says something that I have to ask. Are you talking about any one
I was going to say interviews. I was going to say plural, surely.
Which is the famous one?
It was part of a continuum, I think, as they say in the boardroom. But that's okay, actually, if you're winning. You know, the greatest example in the modern era is Alex Ferguson, who the more he won, the more unpleasant he got. Nothing seemed to anger him more than success. He was deeply embittered by success. Whereas the occasional time you'd see him sort of being, relaxed and cheerful was when they were in a bit of trouble. But you seem to grasp instinctively that if your team isn't doing well, you can't be coming around, just being rude to reporters, because the last thing people need is that. I mean, you're supposed to give some sense of consolation, at least, to supporters. If I'm looking at the manager of Liverpool or whatever, after the game, I don't want him to say kind of, if you thought that was bad, we have some even worse players coming along.
Which is exactly what Jose Mourinho is doing at the moment, but anyway.
Well, but what I wanted, even if he lies to me, even if I know what he's saying is nonsense, I want him to give me something to kind of keep me going, And this wasn't happening with O'Neill. And the odd thing about it is that he is widely known to be a fairly kind of, he has a lot of hinterland. You know what I mean? He's an interesting fellow. He reads books and this kind of thing, right? He this interview with Philip Quinn in the Mail, it rambles over sort of the culture of the 20th century and beyond that. There's a funny line he's on about living in Leicester, where they found the remains of Richard III, Richard III by Shakespeare. And he said the amount of times he was under a car park, he said the amount of times he parked in that Holiday Inn, not knowing that Richard III was underneath it, So it's full of all that sort of stuff, and it's very interesting. And I guess, it's about time. And, it's the right thing to do. And, hopefully he'll continue. I mean, we'll see when the team, if they're successful now, or if they start doing well, maybe he'll, pull back a bit from that. But very, very needed, I must say.
I suppose I'm a little bit more cynical about it. All the best PR companies will advise you to give, to stop people asking you hard questions, you give them something. And so Martin is giving of everything in his interviews at the moment, because Ireland haven't played a match yet and they're starting this new competition. So this one, as Declan says, covers everything: politics, his fascination with the NFL, history, you name it, it's in there. So it'll make an interesting read for people, definitely, as I think his recent interviews have demonstrated. But again, I think Irish fans really, what they want to see is that when Ireland play, before and after, that he is honest and open with journalists, and not cutting people off and from asking questions that they as fans who buy tickets want answered.
Yeah, the thing is about the Tony O'Donoghue stuff is I've known Tony for years, he's an excellent fellow, Tony. Do you know what I mean? He's not a difficult person, he's an easy person to get on with, and so forth. You know what I mean? There's no personal reason for antagonism. You can see some of these geezers on Sky who would naturally antagonise any decent human being. You know what I mean? Tony is just not like that. And that was one of the more inexplicable aspects of it, that he seemed for some reason to reserve a particular bitterness for this blameless individual, So there was this mystery about it as well.
Well, he seems to be O'Neill does seem to be very thin-skinned for somebody who's operated in professional football all his life, that any hard question or implied criticism, he just bristles at it, which often surprises me, because I always regard him as such a confident person, and confident people generally can take criticism or hard questioning.
He said, did you ever listen to his famous address at the Áras an Uachtaráin about his Irishness?
No.
It's very good. It's on YouTube, because it's funny, I was prepping for the interview, which we recorded on Friday, we'll play it out on Tuesday, and you look for previous interviews he's done. He hasn't done many. Like, if you search Martin O'Neill interview, it is now just a litany of him snubbing Tony O'Donoghue. Like, they're page 4 of Google before you get anywhere else. But his address on Áras, at the Áras, is there, and there's no camera, but it's just the audio version of it. Joe Duffy introduces him, so it must have been an RTE thing, and it's back a good few years ago. But he describes himself as a man of contradictions, paradoxes, in no way logical. And your point about the thin-skinnedness and also this sense of confidence in this man who's had such a great career in a tough world, is, it's a massive contradiction that he cares what we think, to the point that it angers him.
It just seems that football management just does this to people. It's just a very odd thing that they. I think politics is like that as well. Like, you would meet some fellow, who's the most cheerful, happy individual, and then maybe 3 years later he becomes the minister for something or other, and he's just a horrible creature, right? It does, some power kind of does something to people, or the stresses of all that. I mean, in the Premier League at the moment, you could say that Klopp, for example, is probably the person, when he's in public, he is maybe most like what he is in real life. You know, he doesn't seem to.
Sean Dyche, maybe, is that?
Yeah, I mean, but the team is doing very well. Do you know what I mean? So he has no reason to kind of be having meltdowns or whatever. But you can imagine when you see him that he's probably a bit like that in real life. You know, he makes reasonable points. If I remember way back, someone said about Wayne Rooney, what do you think of Wayne Rooney drinking? And he said, look at it, in bygone days, all the great players drank like nobody's business. The great thing about players nowadays is that they're so well behaved. So he makes these like reasonable, intelligent, well structured remarks. Because he's doing well. But there's so many other managers who just turn into these terrible people, and almost as soon as they're sacked or it's switched off, they then revert to being kind of normal, fairly reasonable. It's
like the valve is released.
People, yeah.
And I mean, I would say with O'Neill, and it comes across here where he talks to Philip Quinn, and we'll give you some of the detail now, and even I found sitting with him for about 45 minutes on a Friday, is away from the immediacy of a final whistle and the adrenaline and the anger and suddenly being shunted in front of a TV camera with Tony, or even having to do it pre-match where you're tense. Away from that, he's incredibly engaging, charming. I appreciate your cynicism, Cliona. Maybe he's on the charm offensive to some extent, but a far more relaxed character in that environment than, because we only see him match week.
Yeah, well, I think the really interesting thing about him, from watching him from afar, and I don't know him at all, is that when he was in club management, he never seemed to be so sensitive, and he was always able for that give and take. But I do think it raises interesting questions about the level of scrutiny or the level of questions post-match in British soccer. We only very rarely see them. They're very simplistic. Even on TV, they're very simplistic. They often aren't asked any actually hard questions. But it does seem to me that he has been different in the Irish job than he was as a club manager and as a pundit, where he always seemed to be very pleasant, and he never seemed to be carrying that pressure. I don't know why
he does his punditry, and he's perfectly happy to kind of criticise other people. You know what I mean? So it's not as if he has some principled objection to sort of people who don't know what they're talking about, like blathering about football. So I mean, it is a really interesting kind of I mean, maybe even Mourinho is a jolly sort of chap, if you caught him, if you ran into him in the shop, like, you know what I mean? He may well be.
There was a time when he was incredibly charming. Like there was when he first arrived at Chelsea.
Absolutely.
I think we all sort of swooned a bit at Chelsea, didn't we?
Yeah.
Even you, Declan.
Well, the 85th time somebody asked him, are you the special one? Are you still the special one? No, I didn't. I never really.
Never bothered.
He was just trouble to me from the start.
Wise, yes, okay. Belichick has to be considered the best coach that's ever been. That's one of Martin O'Neill's comments. His
point is that Belichick took bad players and rejects from other teams and made them into great players. Yeah, which
they say about O'Neill. He gets the best.
At Leicester, did a big job at Leicester. Yeah.
Likes his American politics. Talks a lot about Nixon, and he had that famous thing about Nixon being miles ahead on the radio debates against Kennedy, but then be behind on TV. Struck him, and then talks about Watergate as well. And he says he's a lousy 14 handicap. His dream four-ball, Martin O'Neill's dream four-ball, is Jordan Spieth. I really love him as a kid, considering he can be wayward off the tee. He pulls it around. He says, I wouldn't mind adding Rory. And then he says, Tiger's the man. So he wants Tiger as his four-ball, dream four-ball. He says, I drive around and watch them. Says Rory's going to win another major. So it's all of this it's all this stuff, or I guess a feel for what he's thinking or what he's, who he admires. Might have been good to get something on the football, but
I think it's just too early. I think so. It just seems to be.
I think there's too much sport generally in the sports pages. There's this whole thing of we live in this world entirely unrelated to anything else in the universe, which itself is weird. It's just unnatural. Of course, that isn't the case. But yet there's a kind of a school of sports journalism which almost like recoils at the notion. You mentioned like even the weather. What's the weather got to do with any, whatever? That's a generalisation, but still, there's a sort of reluctance to delve into this outside world with which we are unconnected.
Yeah,
and which we always like to know about.
No, it's great.
You do like to read about it.
You get a feel from him as a person.
Yeah, you do, of course.
I've never met anyone who's just into sport and literally nothing else. So. It's it's good. It's well worth a read. Page 100. Yeah. Page 100. The Mail on Sunday. Philip Quinn with Martin O'Neill, and he's been doing various interviews. Like he did Emmett Malone's one was yesterday in the Times, and at that point O'Neill was saying that he can handle the criticism but by the same token was incredibly aware of exactly what had been said about him. But it's no problem. But I know exactly what everyone has said. So that's Martin O'Neill, Mail on Sunday, page 100. To stick with football then for a few moments, there's a piece in the Sunday Times, right, seeing as you mentioned Jose there, which centres on statistics in some ways, and it might just prove that statistics are completely useless. It's Jonathan Northcroft. Slow coach is the headline. And so he starts off, Northcroft, by remembering 9 years ago when Jason Park and Wayne Rooney and Ronaldo combined brilliantly in that Champions League semi-final against Arsenal. 13 seconds, they went the length of the pitch and scored. And he wonders, how did Fergie's flashing, thrilling, lightning attackers become so darn ponderous? And that brings in Mourinho. He mentions as well, though, that under Van Gaal it was even worse.
Yeah.
And he cites, great quote, or a terrible quote if you're a Manchester United fan. Brighton newcomer Leon Balogun was talking after their win over Manchester United last week. And he said, I expected the Premier League to be quicker, but then the lads told me this is always the game Manchester United play, which is quite damning. They like to slow it down. Yeah. And so Northcroft says, well, why have they abandoned their DNA? So here's where the stats come in. There's two different groups of stats. The first one is from Stats Bomb Service, Tom Lawrence there. They provide niche data to a professional client base. He's done some fascinating work. Basically, they look at how slowly a side move up the pitch. And he said Manchester United did it more slowly than anyone in the Premier League in the first 2 weeks of this season. And then last season, they were the fourth slowest of the 35 permanent and caretaker managers. Fourth slowest. They go about 2.3 metres per second, which is very slow. And then he adds in a caveat, though. Pep Guardiola is also quite slow. And then you're like, well, what is the bloody point of that statistic then? Well, Manchester City with their 100 points last year were also quite slow.
And also, they show some of the statistics, and in the top five, West Brom are the fastest. So the point is, a long ball down the pitch can certainly knock all these statistics into Kingdom Come.
Jack Charlton's Ireland would have been right at the top of the stats.
It would have been really fast.
Yeah.
It is interesting, but it's got that kind of, elephant in the room thing as well about statistics, that people, it's all right, but they don't actually make a really obvious conclusion from it, right? For example, one of the people will say, well, why do Manchester United then finish second in the league if they're so terrible? Well, the reason is they've got the greatest goalkeeper who ever lived, right? Yeah. I mean, the stats are startling. Do you know what I mean? They'd be virtually in relegation territory without the
stat is David De Gea has conceded 27 of 43 expected goals.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of saves that he wasn't expected to make.
And the other bit is that they're good strikers, right? Okay, so the bit in the middle of the article should be why they need a midfield. Except it isn't really mentioned.
Which is what most people are saying anyway.
That's basically Scholes did something there for years that nobody is doing now.
Yeah. Manchester with Roy Keane and Paul Scholes would be better. Yeah. The net finding.
Right. So they go around the house. It's very interesting to actually though break down the fact that everybody knows that they're playing this slow and boring kind of style, almost culled from certain aspects of Gaelic football. And now it's there in print. But the ongoing tragedy for a lot of people of De Gea, right? There's a whole world of football supporters who have been tormented by David De Gea over the years, by his brilliance. And every year we see that Real Madrid are thinking of signing him, and with a little bit of hope comes in, but we know it's futile. We know they're not going to do it. We know they're going to find some way to fail to do that because they just can't bring themselves to sign goalkeepers as stars. There's some reason for it because he's such a fantastic goalkeeper. Consolingly, he has started throwing a few in recently. Yeah. But again, I think that's a false hope.
You're hoping.
He's doing that only to kind of torment us further, But the stats here tell you the story of this this ongoing sadness that he is keeping them going.
Yeah, might be the best start.
Really extraordinary.
The other batch I thought is Impact.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Yeah, so
they're a German company.
They're a German company, IMPECT, and they are branching out from the Bundesliga to provide data for a growing number of Premier League clubs. And they have this way of analysing it through packing, and packing is a measure of the number of opponents teams move past when they have the ball. And to me, it's just fascinating to see where analysis is going, if you like, and the level of analysis and the amount of people who are being paid for analysis. And we've seen that coming into GA as well. So I think people will be really interested in this notion of packing. I think that's really interesting.
I'm holding out more hope for packing because their analysis...
Than the speed of attack.
Well, they show that United are a dismal 17th for bypassing defenders.
Yeah.
And yet, so the top of the packing stats for going past defenders, Liverpool, Spurs, City, Chelsea. So there's something in, like that might seem like a fairly indicative stat of a good team. Now, I look forward to John Giles being asked about packing this Thursday on the show. I think that will be an interesting discussion.
I always think of John, I thought about him last week when, Chelsea have been mixing it up a bit now, right?
Yeah.
And Sarri has a slightly different role for Kante. And someone pointed out, at last they've found Kante's best position. Immediately, one figure came to mind, John Giles, sitting there thinking, my God, have they learned nothing?
No.
It's extraordinary. But
I honestly think there's a TV show in Giles having to read this article.
I think I'd love to see him get a page from a stats bomb.
I know.
Which is a great name in itself.
At the same time, though, Jose, you see, every time we see Jose now, we think poor from Jose. But at the same time, that thing he came out with recently, that football is run differently now.
Yeah.
After the match, to explain what had happened. That he's basically saying that there's this huge infrastructure now with directors of football and all that, and there used to be just dictators like him, and they were the director of football, and they were the stats man, and they were able to, without doing any stats, they were able to see things. We need someone in midfield. That was why they were doing that job. And I think there is a certain melancholy in him, like he knows that doesn't exist anymore, and he can see that there's no midfield.
Yeah.
Right. But he has to probably now listen to some guy, opening his laptop and explaining this to him in great detail, because this guy is there for reasons that Jose can't comprehend.
I've no doubt stats have a place. It's just I've yet to see really convincing ones. That piece just highlighted for me that stats are kind of half scratching at something, but then they're just full of contradictions. They don't make sense.
They don't say lies and statistics for nothing. And actually, I mean, it cropped up even last week, and there are a couple of companies or people doing brilliant GA stats. But the one that jumped out at me was Nicky Quaid was fifth in terms of goal assists. He's a goalkeeper, so I'm like, it's fairly obvious that yes, he's brilliantly accurate. He gets the ball down and they score off it. But it was interesting that he would crop up in that place. So sometimes stats do pull things out at you and you look at them if you like. I thought there was an interesting piece, Joe, in the Mail on Sunday as well, just on Mourinho as well, because there's loads of pieces on Mourinho and everybody's going, oh, is he going to get the sack? And there's lots of opinion pieces, if you like. But the Joe Bernstein piece I thought is interesting in the Mail, and it is really a piece looking at the way the team of 92, the class of 92, if you like, how they are, through their media work, still hugely enormous figures, and how recently they have rode in behind Mourinho to come to his defence, as opposed to Woodward on the managerial side of the club. And I just think that's a piece well worth reading, I think, for anybody who's interested in Man U, isn't it?
Yeah, we know it was very good. Like he talks, Bernstein, about how Neville almost changed the debate, changed the focus from everybody was on Mourinho's case to Neville looked at Woodward and pointed at Woodward a little bit more. And then he talks about how they work in tandem. Scholes then comes out and has a go at Pogba and his lack of leadership and gets in a spat with Raiola, and suddenly there's less focus on Mourinho. They are a big influence. And
he talks about this hotel, which is, that, and there, I think was Neville and a few of them were, they bought a hotel.
Right by Old Trafford.
Hotel right beside Old Trafford. And weren't they also trying to build a soccer school as well, if I remember correctly from time back. And so the hotel is co-owned by Scholes Giggs, Phil Neville and Butt, who's also head of United's academy, right? So there's a very interesting dynamic going on there, and he's suggesting that there is this very interesting dynamic particularly between Neville and Woodward at the moment, that there's a lot going on behind all of this that's worth watching.
There has been a
Liverpool, of course, that
the old boys,
but it's not just that. I remember distinctly, for some reason, all in the decline of Liverpool, one thing all sticks in my mind. I remember they came out for Merseyside Derby or something on Sky, and Martin Tyler, who was quite an old man at the time still, but he said, it's 7 years since Liverpool have won the league. 7 long years, right? And I remember thinking, like, you know, God, that's such a huge amount of time for them not to win the league. Will our sufferings ever cease, you know? And United are starting to get into that territory now. Then they have this, like Liverpool, they have this army of legends always on hand to sort of make a generally kind of uninteresting contribution. Or, well, Neville is kind of good, obviously, but usually they're pretty dull, like, you know. And so a lot of it is actually, and the ultimate one is signing loads of useless players. I mean, this was always the thing. You know, you have the stats, you have everything like that. You have this whole kind of infrastructure of gibberish, right? But the one that always was with Liverpool was really kind of damning. Was just put a list of players they have signed in the last 10 years and look at it with awe.
The glut, yeah.
I think, how could that have happened?
Giroud, he was going to be the next Zidane, Declan.
And an academy that produces nothing but Jay Spearing since Milan, right? How can that happen? What kind of dysfunction can happen? And now United are getting into that territory whereby no matter who they sign seems to either turn out to be no good or goes back to be or becomes no good. Do you know that there's some basic dysfunction going on there?
Yeah,
and
medium term, that class of '92 Woodward dynamic is worth watching. Like, even remember Graham Hunter was on maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. It wouldn't be beyond, I would think, the class of '92 that their long-term aim is to buy the club.
Yeah,
that would be to lead the buyout.
That's why I think it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is interesting.
There, you know, they have that sort of. There's always this sense that the supporters have that. Well, ultimately, you know, when Kenny took over as manager, it was like it was been handed back to the trustees or something. Right? And they have that similar role, that they are the golden. Sort of
the heartbeat of the club,
tradition.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's interesting in relation to this notion that Abramovich is going to sell Chelsea to another multi-billion millionaires, wherever they are, that aren't, you know, really football people. Whereas you wonder what the feeling would be if they bought it, because they would be seen to be people who are doing it not just for money, not just for profit, but because the club and football is close to their heart. Brenton has a very good quote in this. Pointing out that Ferguson takes pride in the fact that class of '92 are as influential now as they were. And he says there was a quote from him before a charity match last year in which Ferguson said, "Rio's running television alongside Scholesy. Gary runs the City of Manchester now, buying everything." And it's interesting that dynamic is going on there all the time.
It is. It'd be quite something if they did manage to lead a buyout one way or another. The Abramovich one, by the way, it's on the front page of the Times, looking for $2 billion. United are valued at about $4 billion, so maybe Chelsea $2 billion is about right.
Actually, Joe, just on a slightly related thing, so AC Milan are being bought by a hedge fund. Right, this is the sort of people. Elliott Management, the American hedge fund, right? And here's the quote by the company's founder and joint chief executive, Paul Singer. Elliott looks forward to the challenge of realising the club's potential and returning the club to the pantheon of top European football clubs where it rightly belongs. Elliott also strongly believes in the value creation opportunity at Milan. I think that could be traced back to the moment, you know, these key moments was the Kevin Prince Boateng moment at AC Milan. Naturally, we don't take much interest in general in AC Milan in this country until, they appear in a big Champions League match. And I was casually looking at them one night and I saw Kevin Prince Boateng now plays for AC Milan, right? He used to play for Portsmouth.
Yeah.
Okay. At what point in history did AC Milan start signing players from Portsmouth? You know, something again had clearly gone
horribly wrong.
Hugely wrong. You know.
That piece is in the
Sunday
Independent, isn't it?
by Ed Aarons.
Yeah, it's an Observer piece. Yeah.
We'll park the football there for now. We'll take a short break. On the far side, there's lots of pieces on Limerick hurling. Rugby is making its comeback to Pro 14, so there's plenty of pieces there. And David Walsh is writing about Tiger Woods versus Phil Mickelson.
Join that conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
Hi, I'm Brendan Kavanagh, CEO of GDPRcourse.com. GDPR became law on Friday, May 25th. Are you worried that your business, volunteer organisation or club is at risk of being fined? We now run daily accredited GDPR practical implementation courses at our nationwide training facilities. This course gives members of your organisation tasked with GDPR the practical tools to implement and maintain GDPR compliance. Don't get ripped off by expensive consultants. Go to GDPRcourse.com.
Cirque du Soleil returns to Ireland with a brand new show, OVO, at 3 Arena Dublin, October 10th to 14th. Discover a world of insects teeming with amazement, joy, and unstoppable energy. Cirque du Soleil, OVO, at 3 Arena Dublin. Tickets from $40.05 on sale now. Additional charges may apply. Official sponsor, Skoda.
In the Irish Times this Monday, get your copy of our special 24-page commemorative supplement marking the visit of Pope Francis to Ireland. This souvenir publication will feature images from the weekend's events in Croke Park, Knock and the Phoenix Park. All this will be complemented with opinion and insights from our leading writers in the main paper. Get your commemorative supplement only in Monday's edition of the Irish Times.
At Maxol, we support the great work done by Aware, which provides support and education to those impacted by depression, bipolar disorder and related mood conditions. We'll be encouraging you to top up by 10 cent at the till this August. Whether it's a coffee, a sandwich or a tank of Maxol fuel, simply add 10 cent to your purchase at participating service stations and Maxol will also donate €10,000. Your 10 cent will go a long way in supporting Aware, so top up by 10 cent this August. Maxol makes life simple.
Bruce Betting Sportsbook, Casino and now Live Casino. Download the Bruce Betting app to see why for the Premier League, Bruce Betting are giving you more. With price boosts, live in-play betting, cash out and ACCA insurance. Make Bruce Betting your Premier League bookmaker. Bruce Betting, in-store, online and now on your phone. Please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
At Lidl, we're always checking prices so you don't have to. That's how we offer everything you want from your weekly shop at lower prices with amazing offers in store now. Stock up on our brilliant back-to-school meal deal for only €2 or try big brands at Lidl prices like Magnum 4-pack ice creams, an amazing $3.49 or Yop yogurt drink 6-pack only $1.99. Lidl, more for you.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Welcome back. So we're reviewing the Sunday Papers. Watford and Palace are 0-0, 30 minutes gone, and Padraig Harrington has picked up a second birdie of the afternoon. So he's still leading the Czech Masters through 8 holes. He's on 19 under par. His playing partner, Andrea Pavan, picked up a birdie as well to go back to level par through 8. 17 under for the tournament. So in short, it's Harrington 19 under. It is Andrea Pavan 17 under, and then there are 2 players, Tom Lewis and Gavin Green, on 16 under. So a very satisfactory opening 9 for Harrington. If he does something similar on the back 9, he'll be home and hosed. And once again, we'll all have to say, never write off Padraig Harrington. He's just unique.
But what I love about him is that he said, this doesn't put me in the running for the Ryder Cup and I'm not interested in the Ryder Cup, as opposed to Tiger saying, yes, I should be there now.
Yeah, I know. Harrington said I don't deserve to be in it.
Yeah.
But just to see him win again. I mean, anytime he pops up out of nowhere and wins like this, it's just one of those good weekends. So far so good. But 9 holes and the 9th actually, so 10 holes to go for Harrington. And with Cliona Foley and Declan Lynch, we're reviewing the Sunday Papers. Football dominated the first part of our chat. Plenty on Limerick hurling, Cliona. I know you particularly liked piece in the Sunday Independent, page 2 of the Sunday Independent.
Yeah, now it's a week since, right? And it's a difficult job for a Sunday paper to do a really beautiful reflective piece because so much has been done. And I have to mention Kyle Hayes did a diary, a personal diary for the Examiner. If anybody can get it online, yesterday's Examiner was extraordinarily good on the Limerick hurling story. But Kyle Hayes did a 3-page diary of everything from the Thursday to the Tuesday morning when he went to bed at 6 a.m. after the boys have been in the nightclub all night the night before, danced to Mark McCabe and Maniac, and it is just brilliant.
Is it? Yeah.
And if this kid can do everything at 20, he can write as well, because it is a brilliant diary. I don't know whether somebody helped him with it, but it's just fantastic. But Dermot Crowe's piece, I think, Dennis Walsh has a nice piece, but I think Dermot Crowe's piece in Sunday Independent today is outstanding because he went to so many players and also to a parent, and you did it during the week too with Declan Lynch's mum, and he does it with Nicky Quaid's mum, Breda, and for a very special reason, I suppose, because she lost her husband Tommy, who played for Limerick, and I remember the time that Tommy had an accident off a ladder and was killed. He was only 41, and she was widowed with these three young boys, and one of them last weekend won in All Ireland, and the history is fantastic because so many generations of that family have played in goals, including the cousin Joe. So he talks to Nicky, he talks to Breda, his mum, and she talks about and when her husband died, she went coaching with the kids because they were playing and she was going to the club. So it's very reflective of women's place in the GAA, I think, as well. Do you know what I mean? And why the GAA is generally not sexist in my experience, because women are involved from the grassroots up as coaches, doing everything in clubs, administrators, everything. So that end of it is beautiful. He talks to Graham Mulcahy, one of the key members of this team, the guy who has gone from being an early man to back to the star, and we discover why one of the reasons Graham's hurling has become so good this year is that in club he got moved to a more central position and he got his confidence back through that. So that end of it is brilliant as well. He talks to Nicky about the famous save. Was it a save? Was it a block? We don't know. He talks about that in it. And there's just so much in this. And there's a brilliant piece in it as well about Quaid talking about Kyle Hayes. And Kyle Hayes, he said to him recently, "We're Limerick in an All-Ireland final in 1996 too," and they just completely cracked him up because Kyle Hayes was so, I don't know what age he was. So it is just a beautiful piece that covers so many people, including John Kiley, the manager. He just speaks to a load of the central characters, and it is beautifully written, beautifully put together.
Kyle Hayes wasn't born in 96.
Wasn't born, exactly. I was just going to say, sure, he's a millennial, isn't he?
Make you feel old.
Dennis has a nice piece as well. He goes back to Galbally in the Sunday Times. Dennis watched a nice piece with Galbally with John Kiley as well. And John Kiley's party piece apparently is Billy Joel's Piano Man, and he gets persuaded to sing it at the end of the night. But this is a really lovely piece.
I think James E. O'Connor, just a little aspect of it which wasn't mentioned, given what we've been talking about, Roman Abramovich and all this. James E. O'Connor mentions like J.P. McManus in this. The billionaire J.P. McManus. That is there a sort of a sense? I mean, I wouldn't want to get people's hopes up, but I hear that Sheikh Mansour has been seen around the Daisha.
Only you could have worked Roman Abramovich into Limerick, but you've done it seamlessly, actually. So well done. Breda Quaid comes across as an amazing woman. Well, the Quaid family. I mean, Nicky talks about being conscious of his dad all the time, and of course you think about him and.
There's a brilliant piece in it, Joe, about they play for Effin, right?
Yeah.
But Joe wasn't, Tommy Quaid, who Nicky's dad, wasn't originally Effin, right? He was Fiona. And when he died, she talks about how Effin did so much for them, even though they were, as she describes it, blow-ins to the parish. And that's such a key part of the GAA, and that great line that the Antrim hurler Sambo McNaughton says about, you know, they carry you to your grave at the end of it. That thing about the club and the connection it has.
Coffin, the club,
they carry your coffin to the end. So it was really just, I think it's a brilliant summary of everything it's about.
Yeah, no, she was great. I mean, she just says they were unreal. Like, that's how she sums it up, that everything they did for them, they looked after them, they checked in on them. And it's a great piece. It's across kind of 2 pages in the Sunday Independent. And Mulcahy, it's mad the confidence thing, isn't it? Like, it's such an aspect of life.
Graham Mulcahy was such a brilliant young hurler, and he had a turn of speed. I mean, and he always played corner forward, and he just always could burn people with pace. And then in recent years, he just didn't seem to have that pace, and you thought, oh, was it just pace? But it wasn't just pace. It was obviously, because he had the skill, it's just about finding his confidence again. It's really interesting. And in the piece as well, Joe, he talks about, he talks also about that crucial score that he got at the end, but also about the pass that he made that was intercepted to allow Galway score. So it's a really honest piece, really well balanced, and I think it just sums up everything great about that Limerick victory. So even though people will have read loads and loads and loads about Limerick in the last week, I think this one is worth reading as well.
No, there's more here. I mean, Mulcahy talks about doing that silly thing, which is going online and reading about himself, and that really damaging his confidence, because you don't tend to read nice stuff there, is generally the point. But it's all across the papers, like everybody from Dermot Crowe here Paul Kimmage via Floyd Landis, and Nuala O'Whalon is talking about the Limerick Hurlers as well. We have Shane McGrath's writing about them. A lot of people trying to pick their team of the year, actually. That's gone on lots of papers. Michael Dignan and a few others, and realising that with just the nature of this season, it's now really, really hard to pick your team of the year. It's not just, 8 Kilkenny players and 7 Tipperary and then one other token from outside.
But there were so many close games and so many games decided by a point in replays. Exactly.
I mean, Tommy Conlon is very good there about 4 seconds of eternity before the birth of a beautiful new beginning, which is the 4 seconds that Joe Canning's free.
Yeah, he timed it.
It was in the air.
He timed it, which is
brilliant.
brilliant.
Isn't it?
What's it in for 4 seconds?
4 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy says it's
Tommy put a stopwatch on it.
So I always remember there was formation Gary Neville on about Manchester City at the time they got the 2 goals in injury time, referring to there's, like you said, there's 3-4 minutes left, a mountain of time. It's a mountain of time, right? And even in that, 4 seconds is
there's a lovely line in that too, Declan. He's talking about the Limerick team and why people seem to have identified with them, and he's saying he points out a subtle thing that when they were on the open toss bus, you never saw a can or a bottle or anything. He says, we know they've obviously been on the lash, but it's unusual that you haven't seen it. He said, they're ordinary lads. One wouldn't wish to build them into plaster saints or to demand they conform to the stilted standards of public role models, but their conduct in general has been impressively intelligent and he uses that great word, sound.
It's a great way to put it. Yeah, brilliant. Did you watch that? Did you watch the hurling, Declan, or did Brighton Manchester United prove too much for you?
No, I did watch it.
Did you? Okay. Even you admitted that maybe there was something better than a football match on last Sunday at around 3:30.
Well, I can't actually remember why, but I certainly did watch. I mean, I'm sure there was some logistical kind of issue that arose, but of course I did. Yeah, I mean, it was great, and I was delighted that they won. I mean, it always was a little bit of a mystery to me, why don't Limerick ever do well in this, So because once you get the All Ireland hurling, there are not really a lot of you can win the All Ireland with 4 or 5 games, So
you can't anymore. You see, that's the problem, I think, and maybe that's why.
But over
and
the
that's
years,
their advantage now.
Yeah.
Exactly, I think, is because they are so young, they could deal with the schedule.
Yeah, but now normal service has resumed and Super Sunday is back ensconced. And
well, it is a central part of Irish life.
I hear.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to break with that tradition.
Which brings us on to rugby country.
He's other favourite sport.
Yeah. So from GAA to rugby, you're having a hell of a time here.
This is a tough stretch, I mean, you get the hard yards.
There's golf at the end. Hang in there. We've got Woods Mickelson at the end. So the Pro 14 is back, and therefore we have Johnny Sexton right across the papers because he was at the launch, so they've spoken to him. Stephen Jones in the Sunday Times, page 11, is an interesting jump-off point. Tom McGurk is writing maybe a response inadvertently to Jones, but Jones is looking at the top 14, the Pro 14, Cliona.
Pro 14, yeah.
And he wishes it was the top 14. He's looking at the Pro 14 and he ain't that impressed.
But and remember, all of these articles that are in the papers today are on the back of a launch of the Pro 14 where all the captains are brought together and the marketing people do their job, and Stephen Jones is basically pointing out that the marketing people who are calling it a global rugby championship are just slightly inaccurate. I remember the days when it was called the Celtic League, and if I remember correctly, and I remember also that it was never regarded as much of a thing. But in recent years, it's suddenly grown and grown and grown, and now it is marketed as this, fantastically competitive competition. But Stephen Jones is saying, no, it isn't actually, and it can't be by the nature of rugby nowadays. A lot of the top players don't play a lot of games, and he particularly points out, he's talking about Johnny Sexton, and actually if people don't want to choke on their coffee or their tea on a Sunday afternoon, I just thought when you were making the introductions today, imagine if Mesut Ozil walked into a dressing room and said to Johnny Sexton, I'm not playing today because I have a cold.
I know, yeah.
I think that's a brilliant image, isn't it?
I think I don't think it was a mistake that Emery made it public that he has a cold.
Exactly.
He didn't say, he's injured, he's unavailable. He said he's a cold. Yeah.
So a lot of the pieces today are about Sexton talking about taking on the Leinster captaincy. And
says the more I play, the more durable I am. That was the big line.
Last year was extraordinary. He's 33 years old, which is amazing. But Stephen Jones kind of bursts the bubble of is saying, look, the Pro 14 is not this great competition that everybody's talking about, and he's saying, he points out, in the last 2 seasons, Sexton has started 9 matches for Leinster. He has incredibly played 1 away game in 2 seasons. That's good planning by Sexton and his guardians. Nothing to object to there, but this betrays easily the most important criteria for a truly great league in any sport. It should be absolutely flat out. So Tom McGurk then is looking at, and a couple of papers do today. Hugh in the Daily Mirror, in the Mail on Sunday. Hugh Farley has a piece as well about how well placed Ireland are in relation to the World Cup coming, and the fact that they now seem to have got their priorities in order, and the provinces, for you like it or not, are playing ball to the national team, if you like. But Tom McGurk's point is that everything looks very, very rosy at the moment, but, and he does have a but, and his but is that for how long more can players continue to play at this level, and the demands that all of the tournaments that they're playing on are making on them. And he has been banging this drum for a while about the injuries that people have been sustaining. I mean, it's a piece talking as well about looking forward to the season ahead, and other papers are doing it as well. Everybody's dying to see how is Carberry going to do at Munster in number 10. How is Philippe Antipone going to affect Leinster coming back? But then he says one of the things we have to talk about is the relentless injury thing that's happening and points out 20 of the English international were sidelined at one stage last year. Their panel, Sam Warburton having to retire at 29, and just this notion of what's the breaking point really for rugby in terms of physical commitment.
If you were a rugby administrator flicking through the papers, you'd be scratching your head a bit and saying, well, what do you want from me then? Because you have McGurk making that very, very valid point, and then you've Stephen Jones saying, well, I mean, they're resting their players. The Leinster team, which plays in Europe, has very little in common with the Leinster team that plays in the Pro 14, because it's the league's soft underbelly allows them to coast through, and he talks about wanting, the Welsh regions need to improve so that Sexton is forced to turn up away from home, because of the 9 starts, he's only played 1 away game in 2 seasons in the Pro 14. So you have Jones here saying, well, this league's no good because, frankly, I'm not seeing the best players very often. And then McGurk is rightly pointing out, well, rugby's at breaking point with the demands on players.
And I think McGurk's point is more where more people are thinking at this stage is, we watch the injuries now, and the impact tackles, and you just think, wow, how do their bodies stand up to that? I know they're brilliantly trained, but you do wonder how long the schedule can go on, and the whole argument about France and England and how many club games they play, so this debate is not going to go away, I don't think.
It's interesting actually, just briefly, Brendan Fanning was at the launch as well. Martin and I, the new chief executive, he talks about how lots of superlatives and we're going to unlock the potential, and then he says we hope he's right, but then I only deals in superlatives, the Pro 14 CEO, when talking about the Pro 14. As an organisation, however, he says it's hard to get away from the impression of the Pro 14 as understaffed and underfunded. The launch last week was conducted in a hotel undergoing high decibel renovations. It's like working on a building site, is how one of the club representatives put it. And then he talks about how the website, frankly, is dreadful. I mean, he says it's just a black hole, the website. He says it's a mystery how a global brand like Guinness are prepared to hitch their wagon to something that moves so slowly and under the cover of darkness.
It's a good piece by Brendan Fanning there. He has a good quote as well from Sexton about the amount of times he played, they say, with the Lions tour, right? And he says, I look at playing 3 games in 1 week, 55 minutes 3 times in 1 week, in brackets, sub twice, started once. It's amazing what you can do. Right. Well, I went through that whole tour, and people questioned whether I could tour at all because I wasn't durable. So there is that sense of, like, he's 33, which in rugby player years, if you translate that into ordinary human being years, what is it? Is it
he's
like,
phenomenal. Particularly given the match, the game time he plays, and the position that he plays in as well. I mean, there's always this, there's been this ongoing worry about the way he tackles. Does that contribute to his head injuries? And that drives him mad, any criticism of him. But he had proved himself last year to be extraordinarily durable. I mean, superhuman almost. He played so well last year in a season where I really, at the start of the season, I was saying, God, you really worry about him, and you worry about yourself. But he is fantastically durable.
Yeah.
By the way, in terms of you were talking about the structure of rugby and all the big concentration on the provinces, I remember years ago they used to be reading out the rugby results and all these names like Dolphin,
the AIL,
right?
Yeah.
Where are they? If you were a Dolphin man,
Cliona's going to come on to that.
The world has kind of changed.
Oh, it's caved in. Yeah, no, it's been a terrible... I mean, the advent of professionalism has been wonderful for the 4 provinces and for Ireland. But yeah, the IL is gone rapidly. The glory years of the 80s, 90s are long gone. Well, just Hugh Farley's overall point, by the way, is that Ireland are so good. Largely, he says they finally have cracked the sense now that Schmidt is boss, and he said, even go back to 2015, he says that was almost the last effort of the provinces to take control, when he said Matt O'Connor was playing Jimmy Gopper at the 10 when Ireland desperately needed Ian Madigan to get game time, and he says now it's gone, it's done, Ireland are in such control. Even, Dan McFarlane's first coaching session, Joe Schmidt is standing beside him. I hadn't realised that and seen that picture. But Hugh had seen it and he pointed that out, and I thought that was really instructive.
It's very, very, very telling.
He says the message was clear. Ulster have been off the pace for far too long. You're the man, Dan, we believe can turn things around. Let's work together and make that happen. But it's very much on the RFU terms. So, yeah, they've really cracked that, the RFU. Everything's spot on. But what about the Dolphin man that Declan's worried about?
Well,
I think a bit about that,
Declan obviously used to be on the sidelines with me watching Blackrock and St Mary's or Blackrock and Garryowen. And you remember the great busloads that used to come up from Munster for those Dublin...
Shannon days.
Yeah, the Shannon days and Garryowen days. It is extraordinary how that has happened. And I think there is a parallel with that and the GAA in the way that inter-county managers call the shots now, and the club scene seems to be struggling. There's lots of people writing in the paper today saying, hurling is great, but it hasn't helped the club scene. Henry Shefflin is saying it today, Michael Dignan is saying it today, and people also making the point that again, hurling is still only successful in so many counties. But there's a piece, Brendan Fanning has a piece, a good piece, very good, because it's a news story in the Sunday Indo, and it's saying the IRFU has withdrawn its proposal for a new look All-Ireland League. They sent a memo to the clubs on Friday, and they're after kicking to touch this whole review of it. They wanted to set up a 2-tier league of 8 clubs and with a region spread, but they haven't got support for it. And meetings between clubs in Leinster and Munster also threw up issues over the temporary suspension of promotion and relegation. So in other words, there's a big gap between where the IRFU think the club should go now and the clubs themselves, and it's not a healthy place to be, obviously. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen there. He says it's likely there will be regulation change to the AIL, which kicks off in the first week of October, to widen the window for contracted players. There's a worry about this, the amount of pro players you can play as well. Okay, so there's a lot of debate going on behind the scenes. While Irish rugby is in fantastic nick, obviously at provincial and international level, this, which is your grassroots, there are a lot of questions being asked about it.
It's in trouble, and Joe Brawley and others in the past, when they've been foreshadowing problems the GAA are going to have, use the AIL as an example of what can happen to the clubs in GAA if they're kind of let go. So it's not a great.
And I used to go to AIL games, with a passion, and then I'd go and I'd see no internationals playing, and then I just lost interest in going, and that's what's happened. And so it's completely separate. It's almost a separate entity now.
Yeah, no, very much is. So Phil Mickelson versus Tiger Woods, $9 million.
Yeah, David Walsh on the back of the Sunday Times has this. Thinking that they're, it's a kind of the headline is Woods versus Mickelson is a tasteless $9 million gimmick, right? They're going to basically play each other in Vegas, right? For at golf.
At golf,
and it's obviously going to be a big TV event.
Yeah.
I don't know if David is completely thinking this through. I mean, clearly it is an obscene. Whereas the men will be playing for nothing more than an obscene amount of money. Now, we have to look at the milieu of the PGA, right, which has this thing called the FedEx Cup.
Yeah.
If we're talking obscene amounts of money, right, the great trick of the FedEx Cup is that at the end of it, someone who's already worth 50 million is worth 60 million. You get 10 million. They missed the point that the whole pleasure people get in somebody winning 10 million is that they had nothing beforehand, or they had very little. Once they already have 10 or 20 million, the thrill is gone, right? For us anyway, watching it. Yeah. So it's not the obscene amounts of money. In fact, you can see golf at that level as being reflecting everything else in society, where it's a trickle up effect, that you load tons of money into sort of the top 0.0% of the population, and everybody else just gawks at it. There was one interesting moment in it when early on Jim Furyk won 10 million. and he had to get up and down from a bunker at East Lake to win it, right? And there's a basic kind of theoretical thing. If you had to get up and down for 10 million, you know, that's kind of interesting. And then he did it, and that was then it was all over. And so I don't think we can compare, like, if we're saying that there's a moral kind of status here that professional golf has that Vegas doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't buy that really, you know.
This isn't bringing the great game into disrepute.
No, I think it's already pretty disreputable in a lot of ways.
It's interesting they've done $9 million. We were talking about this on our much lauded Golf Weekly podcast. Well,
it was 10 million originally, wasn't
our theory is that someone at FedEx has got on the phone and said, lads,
oh yeah, 10 is the number,
please, our whole thing is 10 million.
Yeah.
Can you, and it's meant to be like the season finale, can you please not do 10 million for your gimmicky thing, please?
That's why they're paying them the big bucks, Joe.
To it or something, or is there tax implications?
No,
I just thought it was
really
a very random
FedEx,
number. That's interesting.
I really think
Joe,
FedEx have gone on.
it.
FedEx have gone on and said, we'll both give you $1 million each on the quiet if you don't play for 10 million, because it just demeans our whole thing. Their whole thing is like it's the richest prize in golf.
Yeah.
They can't have Phil and Tiger swan in and get 10 million.
There are men getting paid 50 million quid a year for insights of the type that you have just arrived at. Okay?
Yeah, well, you're welcome. That one's free for you.
Well, David Walsh's line on it is that he says they can hype it up as much as they like, spew all the usual platitudes of what it'll do for golf's popularity. And I suspect, Declan, that it's really for people to bet on, and I think that's just a circle that just continues. But in David Walsh's opinion, he says this is Floyd with Mayweather Jr. against Conor McGregor with golf clubs and balls. A gimmick with too much riding on it. Vegas is the place for it, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'm a bit split, to be honest. It's pay-per-view. That's the other thing I'm amazed at. Can you imagine anyone ringing up to pay for this? I mean, if you came across it, you'd watch it.
I just can't see any reason for watching it.
If you came across it, I think you'd watch it. You would watch it if you came across it, I think.
Yeah.
Well, they have probably looked at the numbers and they say, like, you know, Tiger is so much more popular than like every other golfer who has ever lived put together.
Yeah.
That I think anybody trying to make a quick few million, how do we get something out of him before he eventually kind of departs the scene? Even like his comeback, you know, if he's in contention for a major, the figures are just astronomical. They just shoot up. And there's something about as well for Brooks Koepka, who's looking like the great player of the age. He's a singularly kind of undemonstrative sort of guy. His genius is, if you like, self-containment. Which is unfortunate, most unfortunate at this present time for the grand old game, you know.
Yeah.
So and then Tiger arrives along and everybody just goes berserk for anything, for him hitting the ball, you know, into the trees, like they love it. You know,
they're miking him up, Declan, as well. So they're saying, oh, it's going to be different because they're miking them up and they're talking about engaging a new youth audience again. And maybe a youth audience is more willing to pay, you know, $7 or $8 to watch this thing or whatever it is than golf's traditional audience. There's no doubt about that.
I think a youth audience is more willing to stream the thing illegally than to pay.
Well, that's true. That's a good point.
I think they'll know how.
Never thought of that.
The older audience might pay. Yeah, I'm really curious. I think this thing is going to be a massive flop, I have to say. I don't think they'll get the numbers paying, but
again,
could be completely wrong.
What's at stake? Two multi-millionaires playing each other for more money.
But again, I take you back to whatever is what's going on at the moment. The what tournament is it?
The Northern Trust Open.
The Northern Trust Open, right? You know, your description of a bunch of millionaires. You know, I mean, in essence, the way golf has gone, it's not really all that.
It's not that much money.
You know?
No, not for these two. I think this would have had a semblance more oomph if they had put forward the money themselves. $4.50 each. My money versus your money. Whereas
again, see, they missed the essential point. There is no skin. Neither of them have any skin in the game.
It's house money. It's house money. You know, I'm sure Nike have given Tiger the 4.5, and I'm sure KPMG have given Phil the 4.5, and they're playing for it's house money. But imagine it was their money. That'd be something.
Of course, but they just missed this point that, you know, when big money is involved, if going back to the sweep or whatever, the whole point is that the person didn't have any money beforehand. That's why he's so happy now. Once he's already got loads of money, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't lose the impact.
It doesn't matter a damn.
How has this changed your life?
Yeah, you know.
No, isn't it in such stark contrast? And I'm not one for comparing professional and amateur sport because they are very different things. But you know, the wave of joy that has followed Limerick's, what Limerick hurling and what winning All Ireland meant to Limerick hurling after 45 years. I remember when this idea was first thrown up, but then I do remember also the first when that FedEx Cup, when that was designed. So the ones who win all the money during the year are now going to come together
to win
and
even more money.
To win even more money. I mean, that is just obscene. I just can't understand it. Yeah.
It does fall flat on its face, the FedEx presentation these days.
And nobody can work out how it works either, the actual
it's got
calculation.
some complicated system now.
How many FedEx points is he behind him?
Yeah.
I don't know. 200, is that much? I don't know.
No, it
doesn't work.
It's ridiculous.
Frankly, it is ridiculous.
I'm moving my business from FedEx immediately.
Is that right? Okay. Anything else anyone wants to mention finally, a nod towards anything?
I suppose the one thing the one thing that caught my eye, Joe, that I thought was really telling, if you like, is that there is nothing in any of the papers today that I can see about the Mayo ladies' row, kind of con row, the fact that they were thrown out. You covered it pretty well with Edwin McGreal during the week. Sinead Cassan did a really good piece in the Irish Independent yesterday on it, but I can't believe that it's a huge story in terms of what happened down there, and clubs all voting against one club, and why the rules are the way they are, and we still don't know what's the root of all those players leaving the Mayo women's team. But nobody has covered it. And Paul Geaney, I noticed, the Kerry footballer was tweeting about it a few days ago as well, and he made a really good point, and he was saying, why isn't some investigative journalist down in Mayo finding the root of this story, or does nobody actually really care? And I suppose as somebody who's interested in all sport, not just women's sport, I do think it's very telling that Keane said, I don't like comparing men and women's, but if this was a men's team, our men's county board, our men's club, everybody would be on that, and it would be everywhere, and there would be proper investigation done of it and proper coverage of it. There's none. Sinead Cassan is the only one who has looked at it, and she did a very good piece. It's worth looking at online in the Independent. But it just tells me that actually 46,000 people might go, as they did last year, and watch the Women's Football All Ireland, and that's great. But actually, are people really interested? And that's fine if they're not interested. I'm interested. I'm not forcing people to be interested, but I do think it's very telling, the lack of coverage and the lack of serious journalism that has been done on it. I think it's very interesting.
Well, it's got this odd thing about it as well, that it flies in the face of this, ruthless pursuit of excellence that we see everywhere in elite sports. As far as I know, Carnarvon are easily the best team in Mayo and in Connacht and probably in Ireland. Is that right?
They're defending All Ireland champions. They've won the Mayo county title 18 times in a row.
And they've been thrown out. Is that right?
The other clubs voted them out because their players walked off the Mayo team. Well, not just their
Mayo
players,
in
but
the
a lot
Ireland
of
final. I mean, last year, this is a serious outfit. It's just, I think just the lack of coverage of it in today's papers is very telling.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. When you mentioned it earlier on, I did think, it's surprising, because it's a nice lead-in time. This thing broke on Monday, Tuesday.
And there was time this week to cover it because the Pope and because there wasn't a men's All-Ireland final. And there isn't a whole load of coverage on the men's football final this week. The Mail is good and the Sunday World are quite good enough, but everybody else is not great enough. Everybody's holding stuff for next week because you have this hiatus, so you had that. So there was time for people to send reporters down there on the ground to find out that story, and I'm just surprised that
it's such a strange story. You would think people other than sports journalists might get interested, because it's so kind of on the face of it, kind of perverse.
Yes, it is a very interesting story, and it's a story about why did so many clubs decide that they would suddenly vote to get rid of this club instead of having some kind of a reasoned discussion on it or going back to their club members. Just the rule they were, everything about that story is bizarre. I just I think if it was a men's club,
the tyranny of the rule book.
Different coverage of it.
There would.
The tyranny of the rule book again.
Unquestionably.
And I'm not saying people have to be interested in it. I just think it tells us really, I suppose, it's truthful about the level of interest, if we're honest about it.
Yeah. On that note, we will wrap things up.
Sorry, Joe, didn't mean to.
No, I think it's a fair point to make. One text in on the O'Neill versus Tony situation. I think journalists, this is us probably, always overplay their importance to the fans. As an Irish season ticket holder, I do not care one bit how the manager treats journalists. We're certainly not under the impression that you would. And it wasn't really, that's not the issue.
No.
when he's been interviewed post-match and been asked about the team not playing well or not passing or certain things not looking right, and he personalises the interview or attacks the journalist or just, shunts off, it's actually you, the season ticket holder, he's ignoring.
Well, I'm not saying he should be. Yeah, my point is, it's not that he's not being polite to journalists. I don't care about that.
No one cares.
It's that he's not answering the questions that the fans want to ask.
It's also he's not finding the right words. Basically, after some kind of terrible defeat, when I see Kloppo, I don't want to see him involved in some weird dispute with some local journalist, the nature of which I'm completely unaware of, right? I want him to say whatever the right words I need to get through the rest of the day, kind of, And if he's not doing that, then he's kind of failing in some basic respect,
Yeah, no, don't worry, Texter. None of us are under the impression that you give a damn how we're getting on. That's totally fair enough.
And we give it out, so we have to be able to take it back. So that's not an issue. Yeah,
100%. Guys, thanks a million for coming in. Cliona Foley, Declan Lynch, pleasure as always. We'll take a short break. And by the way, before I go, let me tell you, Padraig Harrington has gone to 20 under, which is good. So he's 3 under for his round, so he's 20 under. But people behind him are sticking with him. So he's still only 2 shots clear, even though he's picked up 3 shots today. Andrea Pavan is on 18 under, and then there's another guy, Gavin Green, on 17 under. And actually, to be fair, then it drops off back to 14 under. So they're probably out of it at this stage, the 14 under batch. So it's Harrington 20 under, Pavan, the Italian, playing with him on 18 under, and then Gavin Green 17 under. So if Harrington can see off those two, and he is 2 shots and 3 shots clear respectively, then he'll be fine. He's on the 11th hole now, and we'll take a break.